I don't want to waste any time here at the beginning. For once in my life, there's new gameplay for Gotham Knights. Let's talk about it. Gotham Knights showings so far have been far from egregious. In most cases, I don't think they've shown any elements that look flat out bad, but most of what it's shown hasn't looked all that special either. I think the thing that interests me the most is the story, not because we've seen anything from it that's been mind-blowing. They've been pretty conservative with that, but I like the direction that they're taking with the antagonists. Using the Court of Owls feels like a really good way to make everything feel less loose than the Spider-Man and Batman games feel. In those, you have your main threat, and then you have a few throwaway reasons for like 6 other villains to show up in the story, and if you go around doing side quests, you'll find even more masked idiots doing inconsequential things that you still gotta interfere with in between the world-ending BS going on around you. It never really removes me from the game world, but it's also not super coherent or well thought out. The Court of Owls is like an underground organization that's been pulling the strings of Gotham under Bruce's nose for years, and for that to be the central villainous force, we're bound to see a lot of secret underground hideouts and potentially contract killers in the form of major villains, and I think that's good material to pull from for a video game where we'll most likely be seeing a lot of tough bad guys. The Court of Owls is kind of a natural collective tissue in that sense. I will say though that while I'm not all that familiar with the Court of Owls source material, I haven't gotten around to Scott Snyder's Batman run, my understanding is that a big part of their story is how they were able to exist unbeknownst to Batman. He just had no idea they were there, and as somebody who sees himself as almost one with Gotham itself and also as the world's greatest detective, that slap in the face of this group getting the leg up on him all these years was a major facet in how effective they were as rivals. But here obviously they're going up against Batman's prodigies, and I don't know if that's as effective of a setup for a story. I'm gonna assume that the Court of Owls in this universe reveals itself because Batman died and they see an opening to come out of the shadows, but it feels like a big part of their appeal was that they kind of represented a long-standing failure of Batman's, and you kind of lose that if he's big dead, so I still hold reservations on the story, but it's what I'm most excited to see. The world looks pretty detailed, it's a very good looking game. Honestly, I'm kind of bummed that it's not coming to last gen. It doesn't affect me at all, but even though I'm fine with people making things next gen exclusives, even right on launch day, I don't love when something's announced for last gen initially and then they remove that. That's kind of rough. I'm sorry to anyone who was hoping for a last gen release. But one thing about this world is that it looks really empty. Granted, the Arkham games had this as well, but I think we've seen one too many Gothams with a population of 3. Like, yeah, they always have excuses for why everyone is gone, but I think it's time for a Gotham City that's not just a playground for mayhem, it's an actual city that you affect. And it sucks that Knights doesn't seem to be shaping up to be that, especially because it seems like there actually are citizens on the streets running away from stuff, but there's just not many of them. I don't know why. Detective stuff looks like the same super basic, look, big orange splotch, computer, track splotch stuff that we got before. It was never that deep in the Arkham games, and it doesn't look that deep here. But where I do see the biggest step down from Arkham, and obviously that comparison does kind of have to be made, is in the gameplay. Again, nothing's turn your nose at terrible, but there's certainly a few issues, starting with traversal. I think traversal is one of the absolute most important things to get right in an open world superhero game. It's half the battle. If fighting was all that mattered, then every superhero would just have super strength and nothing else. You want the fantasy of flying, gliding, swinging, whatever, from Infamous's smoke teleports and wire riding to Spider-Man's trick-filled movement. This stuff actually matters, and I was always a big fan of Batman's traversal, specifically in Night. The momentum gained from grapples and dives was seriously bumped up for this game, and the way that the cape flapped as you dive down and then spread to let you soar upwards, it was always a fun way to move around. This gameplay showcase showed us 2 methods of traversal, and I didn't like either one. One was just a glider that you couldn't do much with other than point in the direction you wanted to go, and then the other one is jumping. Just like jumping in midair. Okay. The glider has seemingly the same level of engagement as when you control someone that's just walking around on the street. There doesn't seem to be any inputs other than the left stick, and you just kind of float to your destination. Red Hood's ability does have an input, but you just kind of mash jump while going forwards. There's no skill, no cool moves, no satisfying animations, no ability to use it intelligently, no need to use your brain even in the slightest. Good traversal in a superhero game makes you forget that fast travel even exists, but nothing I saw here convinces me that I'm gonna opt for bunny hopping for 20 minutes over a 3-second train ride. If you're making a superhero game and I see it and I'm crossing my fingers that there's fast travel, I'm sorry, but you kinda went wrong somewhere. Red Hood was also shown to have a grapple hook as well, and Batgirl also has one of these, but it's doing the bare minimum out here, let's be honest. There's a motorcycle also, I'm sure that'll be fine to control, but again, it sucks that the most interesting way to get around in a superhero game looks like it might be the vehicle. That's kinda lame. Combat overall is gonna vary based on what character character you play as. Batgirl's gameplay from almost 2 years ago now is a bit more contained, hard-hitting, and disciplined versus Nightwing's flips and crazy acrobatics, and of course Red Hood's non-lethal pistols, which have piercing rounds. Alright then. Because of that, it's kind of hard to critique the combat as a whole, especially since I don't know how far to look into that Batgirl gameplay, seeing as how so much time has passed and seemingly a lot has changed in the game. What I will say is that some of Nightwing's attacks don't look like they hit for much. There were a lot of fancy tricks involved, but when he hit people, it was like they were plushies. I saw a lot of people in the comments complaining that his gameplay was kind of stiff, but honestly worse for me was Red Hood, who sort of stood back and played a few of the same shooting animations while staying well out of range of any danger. It feels like the enemies are designed for melee characters, and I can't help but think that Red Hood's ranged moves don't fit that all that well. I really wanted them to. I thought it was cool having a character that was so different, but seeing his gameplay felt instantly disengaging. The free flow combat just didn't seem to mesh with this style of character. It doesn't help that most of the enemy AI seems incredibly passive in these clips. You get the classic I'm lost moments where an enemy just kind of looks around for a second not knowing what to do, but even when they're honed in on you, they really keep their distance and attack really slowly. It's almost like they're waiting for you to hit them. They barely crowd your space, and you just go from corner to corner attacking them while they cower in fear. That seems like a pretty big problem, especially for a game that boasts co-op. Now, it doesn't have the 4-player co-op that it was recently rumored to have, but even with 2 people, if you already have AI that's this against actually doing anything to you, then when their attention is split, their numbers outmatch you a little less, and their backs might be full-on turned away from you, fights can easily lose all of their impacts. I really think the enemies need to be more aggressive. It might be asking way too much at this point to incorporate any kind of tactical challenges into fights given the co-op feature, but at least let me feel like I'm in danger, especially when I'm playing solo. I'm really hoping that they just turn the difficulty down super low to show off the movesets, but if that's not the case, then this is probably the biggest issue I see here. Stealth looks normal, open world objectives look normal. Look, this video sounds pretty negative, and I'll admit it's not the most positive take I've had on a game, but I haven't seen anything game breaking, anything that's spit in my face, anything that if it's not fixed will make the game terrible. I've just seen very little of the game's most promising element, the story. I've seen a lot of combat that looks a bit stiff and not super engaging given enemy behavior, and I've seen a lot of movement that seems like nothing special. The world also looks good, but it doesn't seem to have anything that really stands out. There's just a lot here that I'm shrugging my shoulders at. I'm of the opinion that WB Montreal made a pretty stellar, overhated game in Arkham Origins. I actually really liked that game, and I had hopes that this one would be really cool too, and to be honest with you, I'll probably still play it because co-op is like a get out of jail free card for some games. I think it'll just be fun playing this with my brother, but I don't see anything particularly amazing being brought to the table here, and some of the staples that you'd like to see in a game of this nature are just falling flat in the previews. Gotham Knights doesn't look like it's going to be a bad game, it's just shaping up to be an aggressively average one, and I'm a bit bummed about that, but we'll see what happens when it comes out. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.